Johann, Josef, Wenzel, Anton, Franz, Karl. Graf Radetzky von Radetz was a Czech nobleman and Austrian general, immortalized by Johann Strauss as Radetzky. March.General Radetzky was in the military for over 70 years to the age of 90, almost up to his death at age 91, and is known for the victories at the Battles of Custoza in Novara during the First Italian War of Independence. Early years. Radetzky was born into a noble family at Château Trebenice near Sedlčany in Bohemia. Orphaned at an early age, he was educated by his grandfather, and after the Count's death, at the Teresa Academy at Vienna. The academy was dissolved during his first year's residence in 1785, and Radetzky became a cadet in the Austrian army. The following year he became an officer, and in 1787 was promoted to first lieutenant in a cuirassier regiment. He served as an adjutant to both Count von Lacy and Field Marshal von Laudon during the Austro-Turkish War of 1787–1791, and in the Austrian Netherlands from 1792 to 1795. In 1798 he married Countess Francesca von Strasse-Oldo-Grafenberg, from Trzic, Carniola. They would have 5 sons and 3 daughters. Napoleonic Wars. In 1795 Radetzky fought on the Rhine. The following year he served with Johann Bewley against Napoleon in Italy, but disliked the indecisive cordon system of warfare which Count von Lacy had instituted and other Austrian generals imitated. His personal courage was conspicuous. At the Battle of Fleurus he led a party of cavalry through the French lines to discover the fate of Charleroi, and at Valeggio sul Mincio in 1796, with a few hussars, he rescued Bewley from the enemy. Promoted to major, he took part in Dagobert Worms's siege of Mantua campaign, which ended in the fall of that fortress. As lieutenant colonel and colonel he displayed bravery and skill in the battles of Trebia and Novi. At the Battle of Marengo, as colonel on the staff of Melas, he was hit by 5 bullets. After endeavoring on the previous evening to bring about modifications in the plan suggested by the scientific Anton von Zach, in 1801 Radetzky was made Knight of the Military Order of Maria Theresa. In 1805, on the march to Ulm, he received news of his promotion to Major General and his assignment to a command in Italy under the Archduke Charles of Austria. He thus took part in the failed campaign of Caldero. Peace provided a short respite, which he spent in studying and teaching the art of war. In 1809 he led a brigade in 5th Corps during the Battle of Eckmühl. Promoted Lieutenant Field Marshal, he commanded a division in 4th Corps at the Battle of Wagram. In 1810 he was created a Commander of the Order of Maria Theresa or awarded the colonelcy of the 5th Radetzky Hussars. From 1809 to 1812, as Chief of the General Staff, he was active in reorganizing the army and its tactical system, but, unable to carry out the reforms he desired owing to the opposition of the Treasury, he resigned his position. In 1813 he was Schwarzenberg's Chief of Staff and had considerable influence on the councils of the Allied sovereigns and generals. Langenau, the Quartermaster General of the Grand Army, found him an indispensable assistant, and he had a considerable share in planning the Leipzig campaign. He won praise for his tactical skills in the battles of Brienne and Arcis-sur-Aube. He entered Paris with the Allied sovereigns in March 1814, and returned with them to the Congress of Vienna, where he appears to have acted as an intermediary between Metternich and Tsar Alexander I of Russia, when the two were not on speaking terms. Italian campaigns. During the succeeding years of peace he disappeared from public view. He resumed his functions as Chief of Staff, but his ardent ideas for reforming the army came to nothing in the face of the general war weariness and desire to let well enough alone. His zeal added to the number of his enemies, and in 1829, after 20 years as Lieutenant Field Marshal, it was proposed to place him on the retired list. The Emperor, unwilling to go so far as this, promoted him General of Cavalry and shelved him by making him governor of a fortress. But very soon afterwards the Restoration settlement of Europe was shaken by fresh upheavals, and Radetzky was brought back into the field of war again. He took part under Fremont in the campaign against the Papal States insurgents, and succeeded that general in the chief command of the Austrian army in Italy in 1834. In 1836, Radetzky was promoted to full field marshal. He was now 70, but still displayed the activity of his youth in the training and discipline of the army he commanded. But here too he was in advance of his time, and the government not only disregarded his suggestions and warnings but also refused the military the money that would have enabled the finest army it possessed to take the field at a moment's notice. Thus the events of 1848 in Italy, which gave the old field marshal his place in history among the great commanders, found him, in the beginning, not indeed unprepared but seriously handicapped in the struggle with Charles Albert's army and the insurgents in Milan and elsewhere, by falling back to the Quadrilatero and there, rebuffing one opponent after another. He was able to spin out time until reinforcements arrived, and thenceforward up to the final triumph at the Battle of Novara on the 23rd of March 1849, he and his army carried all before them. He also commanded the Austrian troops who reconquered Venice after the year-long siege of the rebellious city in May 1848–August 1849. He became a Knight of the Order of the Golden Fleece in 1848. His well-disciplined sense of duty towards officers of higher rank had become more intense in the long years of peace, and, after keeping his army loyal midst the confusion of 1848, he made no attempt to play the part of Wallenstein or even to assume Wellington's role of family advisor to the nation. While as a patriot he dreamed a little of a united Germany, he remained to the end simply the commander of one of the emperor's armies. After his triumph in Italy, he was made Viceroy of Lombardy Venetia from 1848 to 1857, being the only one not of royal Habsburg blood. In spite of his success against Italian patriots, even in Italy he is not remembered unkindly. He was regarded as a fair ruler and a gentleman who paid his debts. There is also a memorable anecdote of his meeting the man responsible for one of the most significant Czechs in the 1848 campaign, General Cesare Launier, shaking his hand and congratulating him on getting a bunch of kids to fight so hard that Radetzky and his men seriously thought they were facing crack professional Sardinian troops. Politically, he worked to reconcile the lower classes, especially to the Habsburg monarchy. He could see the Industrial Revolution coming and hoped to use the conflict of classes to isolate the Patriotic Party, made up mostly of the upper and middle classes, from the rising working class. He was ruthless in punishing rebellious soldiers. Hungarian troopers who had passed to the rebels' side in 1848 were not even shot, but hanged, and violent rebels, but very mild with unarmed opponents. Patriot leaders of European renown, such as Giuseppe Verdi, Alessandro Manzoni and Antonio Rosmini, were allowed to live in peace in the kingdom, while Italy's other reactionary governments drove all their liberals into exile. Already in 1849, at the end of the siege of Venice, he had allowed the local patriot leaders to quietly slip away, and avoid public martyrdom. This was probably the best policy that Austria could possibly adopt in the circumstances. But it was doomed anyway. The events of 1848–49 had dug too deep a chasm between the Italians in the Austrian government. And, as events in 1859 showed, it was only the power of Austrian military might that kept Austria and her client states in Italy. It was part of Radetzky's good fortune that he died 1 year before his whole work dissolved. Death. Josef Wenzel Graf Radetzky of Radetz died on 5 January 1858 after an accident in Milan. The emperor wished that he be buried in the Capuchin crypt. However, Radetzky had bequeathed his earthly remains, and the right to bury him, to Joseph Gottfried Pugfrieder, an army supplies merchant and landowner, who decades earlier had settled his debts. On 19 January 1858, Radetzky was buried at the Heldenberg Memorial Site in Lower Austria, an open-air pantheon with warrior statues celebrating the heroes of the Austrian army's 1848–49th Italian and Hungarian campaigns. Radetzky lies buried in a crypt under a monumental obelisk, together with Field Marshal Maximilian von Wimpfen and Pargfriede. Ancestry. Legacy. In military history, Radetzky's fame rests on one great achievement. But in the history of the Austrian army he figures as the frank and kindly Vater Radetzky, whom the soldiers idolized. In the year following his death, another and greater Italian war broke out, and his beloved army disintegrated and was defeated in every encounter. Radetzky was intimately connected with the Duchy of Carniola, because of his wife and because he owned much land there. His courage was praised in folk songs. The first representative statue in Ljubljana, the capital of Carniola, was a statue of Radetzky. It was placed in the most elite location, the Congress Square, and all main public events took place in front of it. As he owned the Tivoli Castle in Ljubljana, the capital of Carniola, he greatly contributed to the arrangement of Tivoli Park.